This summer, all new author interviews from our Book TV lineup. This week, former President Bill Clinton and his co-author James Patterson talk about their third novel, The First Gentleman. The book is a mystery set in the White House that leads to the first gentleman being tried for murder. The discussion is moderated by mystery writer Alafair Burke and took place in June at the Lincoln Theater in Washington, D.C.
So your third novel together, even on the way here in the car, he said, what band is playing at the theater? And I said, oh, the best band around, this duo. And I told him it was a book event. And he said, why would they write a book together? So
We've been asking ourselves the same thing.
How did this crazy collaboration that turned out to be brilliant, how did it happen to pass?
I don't know, do you remember?
Yeah, we had the same lawyer and agent, Bob Barnett, lives here. And he said, he's the most successful mystery writer ever. And you devour these things like breakfast every day. So you need to write a book together. And I said, why in the living daylights would he ever want to do that? I mean, all he's going to do, look how polarized America is. It'll just make people mad. I can't believe he wants to do it. But if he does, I'm in.
Why?
Yeah, well, no, what I loved about it is, when you write a lot of mysteries, you're making stuff up, you know that. But in this case, is the authenticity, which, President will always, well, it wouldn't happen that way, or at the Secret Service, here's what they might do. They wouldn't do that thing that you were thinking about. So that was one of the big attractions. Plus, I'm a fan, and I knew he was a big mystery writer, and Barnett never stops talking about him, so, it was good. Barnett's a good salesman, so.
I know that guy too. Does everybody know you, Bob?
Yeah, everybody knows Bob Barnett in Washington.
So, okay, so you have this initial conversation. I know that you're a prolific, I'm not supposed to use the word prolific, but can I use it about him? I know that you read a lot of fiction, and he's been so generous to authors. I think you were the first president to come up with summer tastemakers lists, where you do your books of the summer, and crime writers who often get excluded from such things were very appreciative to see that the president read the books that other people read too, which was great. But did it ever dawn on you that while you were making those lists, was it really that Bob Barnett who actually put it in your head, you're gonna write a novel? There was no part of you that was like, I could do this. If I can be president, I can write one of these books?
I did, but I was always busy and I was always working on my foundation, and I'm not sure I ever would have done it if he hadn't come up with the idea of doing it with Jim, because he produces books galore, but they're all, good stories. It's amazing. So I thought, what the heck not? And we were talking, and he said, I'll never forget this. He said, what do you want to write about? This is our first book. I said, I want to write about cybersecurity and cyber terrorism, because it goes beyond Republicans and Democrats, it goes beyond politics. This is a huge issue. And I said, what do you want to write about? He said, I'm a storyteller. I want the president to go missing. So he said, can it happen? I said, maybe, but it's much harder than people think.
And that made it more delicious. Perfect.
Everybody protected by the Secret Service, by law, has the right to sign off protection, except the president. And no president's ever done it. So he said, so how could it happen? And I said, well, if we were faced with an existential crisis related to cyber terrorism.
So you got that in there?
No, it's true. But,
smart.
And only a young genius in the field could block the bad stuff. And he was a libertarian, and he didn't trust government. and he would only meet with the president alone, then the responsible thing for the president to do would be to meet with him. And I can't think of any other ways. So that's how we started. So then he gives me 3 pages of questions to answer about,
because I'm prolific,
all the details, all the authenticity stuff. And he drafted the first 2 chapters and I answered the questions. And then we went back and forth until the end.
So if you're ever wishing at some point that the president was missing, just know it's hard for it to happen.
Was there pushback on that? Was there any pushback of like whether it be from a publisher or whether it comes from
Was there
Secret
some
Service?
pushback about us writing a book together?
No,
there was
about
a push forward.
about imagining a scenario like
No,
you're telling a former president who knows what Secret Service can and can't do is telling people if it had to happen, this is how it would happen. Is there an idea of something too dangerous to write about?
No, because it was credible. Because of it's imaginable that we could have an existential cybersecurity threat. Just like today, it's imaginable that we could have an existential AI threat. Especially if this new bill passes, which says there absolutely must be no regulation of it. So you can imagine it. And then we tried to write it in a realistic way so that the Secret Service was all against it. They tried to stop it from happening. Somebody was following me from a great distance. Not enough to save my life from a bullet, but enough to get there if something happened that was non-fatal. And we went from there. And that's the way we did the next book on the president's daughter is missing. It's about a former president who loses his Secret Service protection except for a very skeletal crew. And his daughter's kidnapped by a guy who's mad at him for something he did when he was president, which is credible. And then this one, it is what it is. And this one, I think, in some ways is our best book, but it's also entirely predictable because in this book, the first gentleman, you have the first woman president, they were living in the same house, but they weren't together at Dartmouth with another guy who becomes the chief of staff of the president. She goes to California, to Stanford, to law school, gets into politics, gets in the legislature, gets elected governor as a fluke, is really good at it, popular, and wins a narrow fight against the senior senator from another state, asks him to become her vice president, and wins the White House. Meanwhile, her husband was the first person.
I was going to say, no spoilers. No spoilers.
No, I mean, this is all in the first chapter. But her husband was an All-American football player at Dartmouth. And the first person...
That's the one thing that sort of strains reality a little bit.
Yeah, but he was drafted in the first round by the Patriots. And he's a great football player, but he has a career-ending injury. And keep in mind, this was taking place about 10 years ago. I think if this injury happened today, with all the advances in arthroscopic surgery, he might be able to get up and go again. But he couldn't.
Well, maybe we'll bring him back for a sequel.
Yeah, on the
that's
playing
one of the
field.
questions. Is there a sequel?
So that's what happened. So he winds up in California doing sports media and teaching. And they get together and they marry. And then she wins the White House. He's really happy for her. He's not one of these guys that's, threatened by her success. He's happy. But he wants to do something useful, and then all hell breaks loose.
So, yeah, let's talk about the hell that breaks loose.
Well, hell. The one thing about the third book is a statement that's been guiding my choices for the last 3 or 4 years, which is, and I think it's actually more important for 20-year-olds than it is for me, And the statement is, my time here is short. What can I do most beautifully? And that's how I sort of decide what projects I want to do if I'm going to work with somebody. I just finished a book with Viola Davis. So it's one of those kind of like, yes, I would love to do that. And in this case, part of it was, I want to write another book with my friend here. Yeah, so that really drove, that was part of it. And I think for both of us.
And you've...
I'll give you one quick little story about the friendship. We now exchange Christmas and birthday presents, stuff like that. A couple of years ago, he gave me a humidor. And he knows I don't smoke. So I called him up. I said, you know, you know I don't smoke, so I put bubble gum or chocolate cigars in here. He said, oh, bubble gum, at our age, you need to exercise our gums and stuff. That's true.
That's true.
Yeah. I'm going to jump ahead because, believe it or not, one of the audience questions that many of you submitted were, are you still putting candy cigars in your humidor, or has he gotten you to...
No, I go with the chocolate.
No.
All right, so that one audience question down. So, Jim, you've written so many books with different collaborators and obviously on your own. How did the process change when your collaborator is a former president?
Well, because for most of them, I'm kind of the boss, but in this case,
I was going to say, who's the boss?
I'm just a scribbler. I don't think it changed. I'll tell you one thing that surprises people. I've never had any arguments with anybody on any of the books we've worked with, ever, anybody. We're doing now one with Mr. Beast. It's kind of
read
cool.
About that. I had to Google who he was.
Cool. At any rate, but there's never been, even with Sue. Sue and I have done a couple of things. Yeah. No fights. We never had a fight. Interesting on this book, and this is one about halfway through, it was a mess. And the president called and he said, it's a mess. I said, I know, but we're going to fix it. Right. And we did. But it was a mess. And that's part of, I think, why it turned out well, is that it presses you to just keep pushing and making it better. And in particular, making these characters more flesh and blood. And that was one of the problems. As the president said, you know, I don't like any of them. Right. That's not good.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that more, because we talked about the setup, and then you said all hell breaks loose. And the part of that hell is that the first gentleman gets, well, there's two other characters right on the page who are kind of your intrepid.
Who are key. They're actually the stars.
They're the truth seekers, right? Brea Cook and her partner, she's the one who went to Stanford Law School and becomes a law professor, much like myself, just saying. And her partner is an investigative writer, Garrett Wilson, and they're writing a book together because they think that back in his old football days, Cole Wright, the first gentleman, may have murdered his girlfriend, who was a cheerleader, and who has never been found. So you've got that kind of half of the book. You've got Cole and his wife, the president, and then you've got Brea and Garrett kind of digging into old secrets.
And Brea and Garrett are kind of the stars.
Yeah, yeah. Like they kind of become the truth seekers. And I can see what you're saying about you weren't sure who to root for because you don't know what to think about the first gentleman. You don't know if he did it or not. And so these two are kind of on the trail. So what was that process of how did you flush out Brea and Garrett and decide to make them the leads, really, as opposed to a lot of books, the fact finder is really just, you know, some cop from the town needs to be digging into them?
Well, because first of all, it would be easy to let it go. I mean, the cheerleader this guy went out with a Patriots cheerleader, which was violated team rules. But she was really beautiful, and he was nuts about her. And then all of a sudden, they break up, and he's in California with his career-ending injury. And nobody knows what happened to her. And so the rumors were always there that maybe he bumped her off. And then the reasons started to come up, and then this young woman and her boyfriend, who's a really cool guy, and a great guitar player. And they had already written one book.
He wanted me to be a saxophone player, but I said,
they'd already written one book uncovering major government corruption. So they had some street cred, and they started digging in it, and everything sort of goes from there.
So you've got the kind of the.
But
four,
also,
you've got the,
it was useful and interesting for us to write about two journalists who they're really good.
Yeah.
They're good at what they do.
Yeah.
They're honest. They're, and one of the things that the president likes about with Bria is because she has to change her tune about something. Yeah.
no spoilers.
There are a lot of political journalists, but these are investigative reporters who basically follow the Roy Cohn rule, never admit error. The difference is if they get caught in a mistake, the honest ones try not to do it again, but it's considered bad form to mention that they did it in the first place, never mind whatever the consequences were. These people are really straight. They just want to know what happened. And they think they know, but they never allow their passionate dedication to the story to take a back seat to the storyline. They justify the inspections, the investigation of what they think the storyline probably is, but they have the character to walk away from various dead ends when they know they could take a shortcut and get a lot of fame. And the way things work today, they could have social media allies spreading the gospel. And maybe the truth comes out and maybe it doesn't. They're not like that. They honestly want to know. And they are quite admirable people, both of them.
To go back to those, so you've got those two out looking for the truth, and then you've got Cole and his wife, Madam President, Maddie, in the White House, and that's kind of our main crew. In terms of the choices you made for the White House couple, you could imagine, if the first book is the president's gone missing and then the president's child's gone missing, it could be the president's accused of murder, right? So why did you make the choice to make it the first gentleman instead of he's the president and she's the suffering first lady who doesn't know whether he killed her or not? Like, I can imagine that.
Part of it is nobody's done that.
Yeah.
Nobody's done that story. And he almost did it, but he wouldn't have been a murderer. But,
And I think it's important because in a way you can tell two stories. That is, every president who has a family and a life, things go wrong. Sometimes they go bad wrong, as all of you know if you've been following the news of the last several years. And yet, if you got the job, you still have to show up for work, for the American people. You have to put all that stuff you're worried about someplace, unless you just have no feelings. But if you care, it's an agony having somebody in your family in the world is hurt. But if you care, you have to realize that you took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the people of the United States. And you have to do it. It's not like you can take a day off and say, I'm sorry, come back with that terror warning tomorrow. I just can't deal with this today. You don't get to do that. You got to show up. So in a way, you can have all the dilemma of the family problems, but if it's not the president's, it's in a way more poignant. And she has to put on her steel armor and look like she's unfeeling from time to time just to get through the day. Meanwhile, he's a big macho guy, but he is not threatened by her success. He is, however, threatened by the fact that everybody in the White House has got something better to do than defend him, and they just want him to go away, which is oftentimes the White House staff will make that decision for things that won't go away. You can't just pretend there's no pink elephant in the living room.
Right.
C-SPAN's Afterwords podcast continues in a moment. Now back to C-SPAN's Afterwords podcast.
And Madeline has this kind of Sophie's choice because she loves this guy. She can't believe that he's a murderer. And that's the key thing here. Is you go back and forth as you're reading the book. Did he do it or did he not do it? There's a lot of evidence that he did it. And you don't want that to happen. But Maddie has to choose ultimately between Cole, her husband, and the country. And she has this social program, which he'll tell you about in a bit, but which is precious to her, and it's an important thing, and she believes in it, and that's put at risk because all of a sudden they got this terrible distraction.
And it does show on the page, like the idea that your husband's on trial, and she's like, I can't go, and she like feels bad, and she can't.
Yeah.
And she's Anyway, it works very well. Like, Jim, this might be more a question for you. One of it's a very kind of how the sausage made is questionable. I guess you did it together, but the thing about your books, not just this one, but all of your books, we've got kind of 4 leads, and then they've got witnesses and law enforcement people that they're all talking to that exist sort of in 3 timelines: at Dartmouth when they're in college, right? The Patriots, like while he's the football player, and the cheerleader goes missing, and then you've got the present where all of hell breaks loose. And I had a lot of times when I'm reading a book, I don't know about you guys, I'll have to like flip back, like which one's that one and which one's that one. And with your books, I never had that problem. And this book I read in one day, I never had that problem as I was speed reading it. And I think, if I'm right, you give just enough detail about each character that I'm like, I know who that guy is now. Like, and I don't get confused, but then you never go too far where it's like, I don't really need to know Bellman two's, backstory.
For better or worse, I'm always very aware of the audience, of a reader, and not to condescend to them at all, but I'm telling a story. I always say that I'm telling a story, and there's one person sitting across from me, and I don't want them to get up until I'm finished. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what's driving me. And the other notion for my books is, and actually Michael Connolly said this, Michael's a good friend, and he said what Jim does is every single chapter moves both the plot and the characterization forward and turns on the movie projector in our heads. I don't know that I succeed with that with every chapter, or that we succeed with it with every chapter, but that's the goal. That's what we try to do.
And then once the process starts, once you kind of know what the concept is, right? The president's missing, or this gentleman's accused of murder. Like, then what happens? Like, do you come up with the characters first? Is it plot? Who does what? Like,
we have an outline of where we think it's going.
Okay.
And we know perfectly well there'll be places in the outline where we'll veer off the script. But the outline imposes some discipline and reminds us that there has to be a middle and an end to this story. And he taught me that. I mean, because I'm bad to get interested in something and tell you more than you want to know about the Social Security crisis or whatever it is.
Nah.
Somebody said, I told somebody, one of the things I learned when I was president is that it was the only profession, politics, when people were surprised if you actually knew something about whatever it is you were talking about. I thought I was supposed to try to know everything.
Yeah, that's right.
And so he said to me, yeah, you are, but you're not supposed to tell it. You don't have to tell everything. You have to figure out what to say and what not to say.
Well, so much of it is you telling another human being a story. And a lot of people, they're telling you a story, and it's like, get to it, But, the president talked about the beginning, middle, and end. If you can write beginnings and ends, you will make a lot of money. If you can write middles, you'll win the Nobel Prize.
Oh, now I'm going to
Nobody writes middles.
Think about that. I'm like, which parts do I do?
No, you see it book after book, even the good ones.
It is.
They say, I'm hooked, and then it's like you're running and page.
I don't feel like that about this book at all, though. And I think when you said that you got about halfway through and thought it wasn't working, and you regrouped and went deeper with the characters.
But we're very aware of that in terms of what's going to keep this story moving along. What's happening? Something happens. There's something happens in the middle of this book which will blow everybody's mind.
Yeah, that's why I was saying. I was like, I was definitely not bored in the middle of the book, for sure. You were talking about you're telling someone else's story.
Because we expect us to win a Nobel.
Definitely going to sell a lot of copies.
Maybe not. How about an Edgar?
But you're saying that you're really telling someone else's story and you don't want to lose the audience, but it's not your story, it's someone else's story, as you said. And to do that, you kind of have to have empathy with the characters. You have to live in their head. And since in another world you could have been the first gentleman, there must have been, can you talk a little bit about how that affected your ability to kind of channel Paul's feelings?
First of all, I thought until 10 days before the election, Hillary was going to win. And she was. She was 6 points ahead. She had won the 3 debates. She had won the conventions. She was going to win. And then, in spite of the fact that the campaign never did what I think should have been done on the email thing, because it was a phony story. It was phony from the beginning. The rules were different. She totally followed them. And we should have spent $50 million defending her honor and integrity, I think. But we didn't do that. But the voters saw it in the debates, and the voters saw it in the conventions. So we were going to win. And then Comey did what he did, which was to break 70 years of FBI policy, never to comment on a criminal case within 2 months of an election if there was not going to be an indictment. Even J. Edgar Hoover wouldn't do that. And the press acted like it was both normal, revealing, and they knew there was 99.99% chance that there was nothing in the emails. And I know he knew it because he sat on them for several weeks before he did anything with it, which makes it even worse. So I went through all that, and during that time, I had given a lot of thought to how can I be available if I need it, and otherwise stay out of her hair. Because she had proved she could run big operations. She did a really good job at the State Department. And she'd been a great senator from New York. And so I gave a lot of thought to it. So I was able to, it was sort of a cold second place, but I did my best with this poor guy who was a lot better, more attractive first gentleman than I would have been. He was young and strapping and had been a great athlete. But he had to figure out how could he contribute, be there when his wife needed him for what she needed, and otherwise stay out of the way and not do anything.
But that's where you and Hillary are in real life.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a funny line, actually.
Jim, having a co-author who knows things that most people don't know, what are the ways that you kind of leaned into that in terms of figuring out how to take everything he knows and add it to a thriller, and to, whether it's in big ways or small?
It's just scenes where you know that. I'm always thinking about the scene anyway, and sometimes I'll just we'll say let's do this scene just because it'll use some information that people would be interested in and they don't know. I mean, obviously, the fact that the president had thought about being the first gentleman was really useful. So we didn't have to invent that. We didn't have to figure, what would that be like? Well, he knows exactly. He's one of the few people on the planet that has thought about that. Mr. Imhoff would be another. But I mean, not many people have thought about what it would be like to be the first gentleman. Have
you ever found out something from him that you thought you knew and you found out you were wrong, or if he gave you something new that just completely blew your mind? No, but sometimes I always say you don't know what you don't know. Like I'll assume that I know something, and then it turns out, oh, I guess it's something to is there something he's told you that's really surprising? Like you just never would have thought of?
Instinctively, yeah, sometimes we know. We have a sense of it,
You said the policy, you brought that up, you could talk about Social Security, and the thing that Maddie, the president, is working on that's so important to her, that the reason why she can't go to her husband's trial, and it's alluded to a lot in the book, and initially it's kind of in passing, and then you find out what it really is, but it's this thing called the grand bargain, and every time it was referenced, it just kind of sounded like this unicorn answer of bring down the deficit while we also, keep all of the things we want, all the good entitlements, and also invest in education. It's like everything. I'm like, yes, I want to know more about the grand bargain.
And that's the key,
And
because
then
we made that
yeah.
a mystery through the mystery,
Yes.
which is great. And then, of course, we
But
had
then
to pay it
eventually the details come out, which is pretty amazing. And part of what she's, when you said that the ways that Cole can help her kind of stay out of the way, she'll find out that some senator, who might be able to be persuadable, like loves football. And so Cole shows up and does his jock thing and wins them over, which I loved the idea of that. Not because the policy wonk details, but just because they're like, oh, I used to root for you when you were on the Packers. So, Patriots, right team. So why did you decide to, you could have given the president any kind of big, global treaty that needed to be negotiated, or the threat of war. You could come up with
because
many
this thing is
imminent
so
crises.
fresh and relevant.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
the nice thing
talk
about
that.
this is a nonfiction element of the book,
Yes.
but it doesn't get in the way of, it's part of the mystery, and then it is revealed in terms of a plan. And the idea of this man putting this plan out there, and he can do that because he's not an officer, he doesn't have to worry about, but he can lay out, here's what I think, which I think is really very special.
I do have to say, we're about to make it much harder, because if you're going to get the debt down, it's much bigger now than it was when I had 3 surpluses after 5 years of bringing it down. But we have to make it a smaller percentage of our national income. We have to get a hold of it. And if we pass this budget, you've seen this whole Doge Elon Musk thing. It doesn't amount to a hell of beans compared to that tax cut, reenacting it. So it's going to add at least $2.7 trillion to the national debt over the next several years, and maybe more. And there are people who want to believe that it doesn't matter. And there are people who want to believe every time you cut taxes, you generate more revenues than it costs. Even though it wasn't true for President Reagan, it wasn't true for President Bush, it wasn't true for the second President Bush. It's not true for anybody. You have to look at the arithmetic of it. Somebody asked me what the secret to my success was, and I said arithmetic. I said, I was basically just raised by a bright but not very well educated and very straightforward, enlarged family. And I never thought you would get too far away from 2 + 2 is 4. Now, there is a rate of return on investments, and there is all this other stuff you can argue, but anyway, I hope, if you read the book, I hope you will read it, because I do think that we're going to have to do something like that if we want to secure Social Security and Medicare and the Medicaid program, which is very, very important, and have anything left over for science and technology that drive our growth. I mean, basically, we're putting ourselves in a position where all the cuts are coming out of science and technology and work we do around the world to keep poor people, most of them kids, alive. And the big chunks they don't want to mess with, which are Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and national defense, and interest on the debt. So the interest on the debt is just going to get higher. And I tried to deal with all that in this book. Not long time, it was a mystery, but I did do a couple of pages so that people could see that if the government were serious about avoiding a calamity, this is more or less what we'd have to do.
No, I thought it was a brilliant sleight of hand of you take this propulsive thriller novel that people just want to keep the pages turning, but then you take this kind of sprawling and serious domestic budget plan and policy plan and make it part of the plot in a way that doesn't weigh it down at all. It's like, you're like, oh, okay, I want to know more about what this plan is and why they all feel so aspirationally towards it. And we're at a time right now where some people, they hear politics and they turn off the TV, or they might not want to read a book, or it feels so divisive. And this book feels, it's so insidery, of course, and it has that whole political process, and whipping votes is part of the plot. But it never feels partisan. I don't think we ever find out what party the president is part of, do we? I don't remember that.
I don't
It
think
seemed
we
to
do,
me, I don't
really,
think we
no.
even know, like in my
Some
mind, I was kind of
people
like, I'm
assume,
not,
but,
she just seemed like a reasonable lady who wanted to bring two parties together. I'm like, hey, that sounds pretty good to me. And
Washington
the process sounded aspirational.
Washington used to be more
Yeah.
like that.
Yes.
Used to be more like that.
So I was
It's
wondering-
like, and in his presidency, he said, look, we got to work this out. Seriously, we got to
So I
work
was
it
wondering,
out.
so when you talked about that, because setting aside what the policy proposals are for now, just even the way the book nods at process, that there's allusions to the fact that the two sides never agree anymore, and she's just so convinced that this plan is so good and they're the right people to go around and get consensus. It's like it alluded to a time when you could get things passed with 70% consensus, and the ideas that you propose do sound like 70% popular, favorable types of ideas. So was that part of the ideas, that was there one way to get past people's divisiveness, and which might make them not want to read a political thriller, is to kind of refer to a process that used to be normal? the idea of it's a big challenge that she's going to bring everybody together?
I believe that the differences in America are overstated. But they're overstated for good reasons, because they manifest themselves in elections. Because people who have very intense feelings are more likely to vote. But I think you could get 65, 70% of the American people to agree on a lot of these things if they knew they didn't have to change parties, they didn't have to, wear a hair shirt, they didn't have to do anything. They just had this problem. And I remember when Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House when I was president. And they had gone way to the right, and in a populist way, and that explained their victories. But he's really smart. And we've talked about everything under the sun. He knew that I was a big fan of E.O. Wilson, who was the world's most famous and important insect expert. I learned from him that the combined weight of ants on Earth exceeds the combined weight of people on Earth.
What? I'm not going to sleep well tonight.
And so, anyway, this guy's an
forget
Alabama country boy who winds up at MIT. So Newt was reading on that too. And I've still got a book he gave me by E.O. Wilson, whom I had the honor to get to know, and I thought it was amazing. But the point is, his field marshals, Tom DeLay and Dick Armey, finally got to where they wouldn't let him come to the White House alone. You let Clinton get in the room with him, and they'll sit there in the Oval Office, and God only knows what they talk about, and they'll wind up reaching an agreement. And the last thing we need is an agreement. And if you're, to be fair to whoever's in the opposition, if you think you can't do anything unless you win the White House, then the incentive to just say no always are there. And if you think the country is more or less secure and you don't really understand what all the hoopla is about, enough voters may stay home and stay out of the debate that the more extreme party will win. And it's a problem now, because now we're dealing with things that something happens, let's say to Josh Hawley, the senator from Missouri, who was supposed to be, very right-wing and on the cutting edge of the culture war, and he realized how many constituents he had who depended on the Medicaid expansion in the healthcare law. And he's very upset that it's going to be messed with and that 10 or 12 or maybe 15 million people can lose their health insurance. And he should be. But the point is, if people would just get together and listen to each other and talk through this stuff, you'd be amazed how often they can reach an agreement. Which is why I could put this in here without feeling hypocritical, because I actually still believe it can be done. I mean, we have this, George Bush and I do this program called the Presidential Leadership Scholars, and every year he picks 30 and I pick 30. And their only requirement is they have to be involved in something besides their day job that has a public purpose. Helping veterans get jobs when they get out of the service, whatever. And then they go to his library, his dad's library, the Johnson Library, and mine. We meet with them. He does, I do. Then we do a graduation together. For the last 5 years, when all this stuff's been roiling, without fail, the Republicans come up to me and the Democrats go up to him and thank him because they didn't think there was anybody like the people that they've been meeting and working with for the last 6 months. So when you read this stuff, it's not as...
C-SPAN's Afterwords podcast continues in a moment. Now back to C-SPAN's Afterwords podcast.
impossible as it seems.
Yeah, I mean, just as a reader and as a news watcher and someone who cares a lot about our country, I just thought it was that instead of leaning into, a lot of political thrillers now are taking this moment, right, this really divisive moment, and leading into that to create the drama. And instead, you used what was very recent for us, the normal lawmaking mechanism of consensus, and making that the dramatic move, right? Like watching them try to get that consensus anyway. I wanted to tell you I thought it was really well done because it doesn't turn people off, and it feels realistic, and it felt exciting. It added to the drama.
But we have to be realistic here. The more times you redistrict the congressional districts, when there's all this polarization, the more likely they are to be punished in the primary for trying to make a deal. And so that's what aggravates this. Now, there are options like California. Everybody thinks California is so liberal, but the truth is the Democratic legislature in California knowingly gave up 2 or 3 congressional seats because they changed the way they elect. Everybody runs in one primary. And then the top 2 are in a runoff. And New York is now in the ranked choice voting, which you get the same sort of thing. It's different, and it's just a manifestation of people saying, dear God, it's a job, please do something. And I still have hope.
Well, I bet there's a lot of James Patterson and Bill Clinton fans in the current House and Senate, and I think you should send them all books with the grand bargain parts highlighted.
Okay.
Okay. I know you both love to read other novelists. Do you have any recent favorites? Do you guys talk books with each other? Do you swap books and suggestions?
We do, yeah, we do. I'm about halfway through Mark Twain. I love Chernow. He's really wonderful. I just read Mike Connolly's new book. I read The Wife recently.
Oh, thank you.
It's so funny because I've got his new book, Connolly, in my like, and his brother, 30 odd years ago when I became president, back in the dark ages, his brother was in the military on the White House communications staff. And so he arranged for me to meet. He got a note to me. He said, "Do you know anything about my brother?" I said, "Yeah, I've read all his books." And so I met him at the Los Angeles airport. And I think he's gotten better and better and better as he's gotten older. So I've got that one. I haven't started it yet. I'm about 180 pages into Mark Twain. And I noticed that Ron Chernow just got killed in one of the reviews, but I think it's a pretty good book.
Yeah, he's a good storyteller. For a nonfiction guy, I don't like those nonfiction guys that much. But yeah, I'm also on the plane. I was reading Dave Barry's Class Clown. That's fun.
He read Dave Barry, and I'm about halfway through Carl Hyacint's new book.
That's what I'm reading.
And
right
people from Florida argue about which one of them is funnier.
Yeah, they're both pretty funny.
Okay, I think I heard you guys say that there might be somebody trying to adapt this book. Am I right about that? Always somebody trying to
Movie
adapt
stuff?
something.
Yeah. No, I mean, one of the nice things here, Hollywood, I don't know, they're always trying to, I would never write a Hollywood book. If I did, I got my first line, "Hello, I lied." But we actually, I mean, it's the worst of all things. We had this one, and they actually shot for 4 days. And then they had to shut down because of COVID. With the president missing, and then they never came back.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So they got 4 days worth of film somewhere, which we've never seen. That's sort of the worst. But with this one, we have Stephen Knight attached to write it. Stephen Knight did Peaky Blinders.
Oh, that's great.
He's really, really, really good. And,
are there things that, any adaptation?
That's how stuff gets made, by the way.
Yeah.
You get somebody attached who they
yeah.
believe in, and all of a sudden.
I mean, inevitably they have to change some things just because the form is different. But are there things about this book that what's the heart of it that you would not want anyone to change?
I think the heart of it is the journalist. I think Brie is the heart of it, for me.
Yeah, it's a story of a brilliant young woman who loves this terrific guy, and they risk their lives to try to find the truth. It's a whole other story, but it's a real story too. And meanwhile, you've got this president who's trying to do her best and realizes that she's, some days she'll look like a heartless because she just has to go to work and has to do this. And you got this guy who seems like a genuinely good guy who doesn't have standard macho hang-ups about his wife being president, but neither does he want to roll over and play dead when they're trying to call him a killer and he's just screaming, I'm not. And you really can't tell because there is significant evidence that implicates him in this young woman's death.
Well, it's a terrific read. If you're going to start it tonight, don't do that if you have to work tomorrow because you'll be up all night. I've got a bunch of questions from y'all, the audience, and I will start going through these. How does your process with writing these novels differ from that when you write your autobiography or other books you've written? I think you've both written memoirs. Do you use the same part of your brain?
The autobiography, that's sort of straight on, since that's just my story. I'm really, it's interesting with collaboration, and some people go, oh, that's so, something wrong about it. And really, if you think about it, if the world's ever going to be saved, it's going to be because we finally learn how to collaborate. But, Sistine Chapel, you think, here's 30, 40 wonderful, making that happen. And I think once again, I don't think it'd be great if every novel was a collaboration, but I think it can work tremendously well as long as the people get along. And as I said, I've never had an issue with it. It's always been and always different, a little different. Kwame Alexander, we did the Muhammad Ali as a kid in Louisville, and that was different than. And the fun thing about that book is, it's half prose, which I wrote, and half poetry that he wrote. And that's kind of a cool way to put a book together and to make it work.
I also think in some ways it's more efficient. Like when I wrote my autobiography, I went through it 5 or 6 times, changing stuff right to the very end. And I had late people read it who knew things that I didn't really know, who remembered things I didn't, you know. But this time we're just doing it all together, and I think it is we help each other to get to the desired place quicker. I think it's more efficient in a funny way.
Okay, did you have a favorite character to write in this book?
For me, she was the best. You know, the interesting thing with Hollywood, they're going, well, maybe we should, get a big star attached and for Cole. I'm going, well, if you think about Cole, really, the dramatic stuff happens before the book starts. And then, well, there's going to be a trial, but how much is he going to do in the trial? So it'll be a good part, but I don't know that you should start there in terms of casting, because there's a lot. Bree's part is really juicy. Gary's part is really juicy. Actually, Cole's part is maybe the least juicy in terms of a movie or series, whatever they're going to make out of it. I think they're going to do it. They're going to be doing a series, one of those 6-parters, yeah.
I'm a little different. I think you could make him, at the center of all this intrigue that's always going on in the White House. Because let's face it, if you're a young person in the White House and you've got a good job and you're trying to do it, this is the last thing you need. The first gentleman on trial. You just want it to go away.
Right.
So who's going to be this guy's friend? And if his wife blinks, he's toast. So I think that's interesting. And we were at a point in the book when we got to this, where it was obvious what was going on, that I think we made the right decision to leave him kind of on his own as he was. But I think he and I think the young woman journalist are both really important in this.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things in terms of, I won't tell you what happens, but you always have that option of doing the opposite. As you're writing, you're going to go, you know what?
Yeah.
We're going to change it.
Did you know? Again, promise no spoilers. Did you change it?
Did
it ever flip?
No. I don't know if we ever considered. I don't think we ever considered.
But even when we were writing it, there were days when we couldn't quite be sure.
Yeah.
That we were on the right path.
Yeah.
And if we knew what we thought ought to happen. But we had to work like heck to get there, which is like real life, isn't it? Don't you? I mean, that's...
Not for these folks. They just go right there and get it.
Of the 3 novels you've written together, do you have a favorite, and which was the most fun for you to work on together?
I think the least favorite for me is The President's Daughter, because it's just a little more of a thriller without necessarily, more complexity. I think the first and the third have more complexity, so they're more interesting to me, and maybe more interesting characters.
I actually thought it was quite a good book, and it was, in some ways, the most compelling conventional thriller. But the kinds of things that happen in a lot of books.
Yeah.
And the most interesting thing to me, because I've been there, is that how the former president put his life together after he left the White House, and the nature of his relationship with his daughter, and how all the things that bind you together, because every single solitary day is scheduled.
Are you going to write another one?
they drift away.
Sorry.
So, I think all this is interesting to me. I thought they were all interesting, but I think this one is probably on balance the best. I love the first one. I had a big time doing that.
Don't you love it when it's their first day out? The book just came out today. You were at the launch. Don't you love it when you spend all this time?
Yeah.
You spend all this time writing the book. You've got the lead up to the book, doing CBS Sunday and doing USA Today, doing this, and when people ask you when's the next one.
Yeah. Oh, we're already halfway through it. No.
But I like it when a lot of people have read it and then ask you when's the next one, because that means they like it.
Right. Yeah.
I've always read it.
Yeah.
This is a good one. This is fun. Who's the better golfer?
He is.
I have more holes than one. He's been president more times, but I have more holes than one.
Okay.
This man has 9 holes in one.
What?
Well, my wife, Sue,
9.
Sue has 6.
His wife, who's out in the audience, has 6. And she can hit the ball further than both of us.
Yeah.
Go Sue.
So you can imagine it's a humbling experience for me every time we play golf.
Imagine living with her.
But I'm in a good humor about it. I've reached the point when I remember 5 years ago I decided that I'd rather work than play golf because I was never going to get much better, so I got much worse. But I still enjoy going out and having a good time and once in a while hitting the ball that goes in the direction I aim.
My line about Sue is if Sue ever leaves me, I'm going with her.
Oh, that's very sweet. If you were going to cast the film, you said that, do you have actresses in mind or the types in mind, people in mind? You never really talk about that.
No, I haven't really thought about it. I don't know. Zoe Saldana,
Yeah.
she's spectacular. She is so good. She's unbelievable. I think she's got a commercial going. I even like the commercial.
That's a compelling actor. When
she's spectacular. I have no idea what to do. I don't even guess about what happens out there. It's its own
This
world.
guy's really big. Maybe the guy that plays Reacher.
Oh, yeah.
He may be too big.
Alan Richter? No, you're catching me off
something
guard.
like that. Alan,
On the tip of my tongue. No. I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. Do you think you would
what's your
ever
new
write?
book?
Are you going to collaborate?
I'm sorry,
would
what?
you? Could you see yourself going and writing fiction, like just doing this on your own? You got.
Yeah, I thought about it.
Like
but
you need another job.
It wouldn't be, and I might really like it, and it'd be easier because I'm traveling all the time now, working, with my foundation. Unless I get put out of business by the current direction of politics.
No.
But I'd really, if I wrote a book by myself and it was halfway worth reading, I'd have to dedicate it to him because I didn't know what the heck I was doing until I started working with him and he taught me how he did this.
Do you think you've picked up anything since writing fiction with him that would change the way you would approach writing another nonfiction book that you would
Absolutely.
change? How do you think that would change how you write?
I think I would do a better job Thomas Jefferson once said, if I had more time, I would have written shorter letters. And he was a pretty smart fellow. So I think I would at least break the stuff up into bite-sized limits. This new book I wrote about my life after the White House is much shorter than the book I wrote when I left the White House. And there's a lot in it. And I like it. But I may have covered too many topics because I'm interested in just about everything. It keeps you going, And I have no idea.
Do you outline?
I don't outline. I used to just wing it, and it turned out to be a really stupid way to write books. And I did
Not
about
the most economical.
I did about 8 of them that way, and I started collaborating with Mary Higgins Clark. And I think I learned the same lessons, and she'd kind of be like, "Let's get to it."
Did she outline?
But
Mary, did
no,
she?
she didn't either. So
really?
we
Okay.
decided we wanted to work together. We're like, so how are we going to do this? And she goes, well, I just make it up as I go along. I said, well, I make it up as we go along. So I don't know how that's going to work. I asked her if I could move into her house and we would just live together until we were done. And she didn't like that idea. So we had to learn to outline. So I wouldn't call it outline, but we would, it's kind of like what y'all were talking about. It sounds like you talked about it
Well, I
first.
outline like
you
crazy.
want
That's
the
my
idea, but we started with the idea, like, the president goes missing or the first gentleman gets accused. And then we would say, who are the people that makes that interesting? And so it's like kind of, once you said Brea or Brea? Brea?
Whatever.
It's B-R-E-A. So in my mind, I was saying
It
Brea.
reminds me of with Along Came a Spider. They call up and say, well, how do you pronounce Gary Siniji's name? I said, Gary Siniji. So then, of course, in the film, they call him Sonji.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Brea.
Sorry, I asked.
So like you were saying, once you came up with Brea as being the person who can tell the story maybe better than Cole could, that's kind of when the magic would happen. We'd come up with the characters and then we would start writing. So it did when you were talking about how the sausage gets made.
Characters,
I was like,
the whole
it kinda
thing. I mean,
worked the
people
same
don't
way,
think
but-
of, people are a little silly when they go, oh, Jim, his style is short chapters. No, it's not. My thing is getting, and that was a key here in terms of, with this book, when we sat down to try to fix it, we just really talked about the characters.
Yeah.
Who are they? What's at their core? What makes them more interesting? Alex Cross, what really drives him, and actually drives Michael Bennett, is we all, or not all of us, but most of us have to deal with juggling our work life and our family life. So with Cross, that's really what he does. And his work life is, of course, very intense. And one of the nice things about the series is Aldous Hodge, he has that intense look. So he's great in the detective parts, and he's really good with the kids. So, and there's the two pieces of Alex Cross.
Yeah.
Morgan, they couldn't do the kid part. Well, they could have, but it would have been a little tricky. So it never had that. It only had, and Morgan's a great actor, obviously, but all you got was the detective part of it.
Right. Your body of work has to be unrivaled. See, I said.
Yeah, rather than that P word.
The P word. So I gotta wonder, do you ever feel like you're running out? I mean,
No.
That's amazing
No, I don't.
to me.
And as I say, and part of it is just sort of stretching. I want to, because this isn't about me tonight, but the thing with Viola, and Viola's really it's great. I love the book. I love the book. I generally don't write realism, and it is. It's about an abortion in Alabama, and it's just terrific. You'll like it. I think a lot. And Mr. Beast. It's just like, I don't know. That's going to be a real challenge and interesting, and I'm excited about it. And he's an interesting person, 27 years old, very, very bright, very focused. And the thing with he and I is he loves writing, doing the videos. I love telling stories, and we both like to give money away. So that was the connection.
Oh, is that really it? That's
Yeah.
kind of how you decided that you could do something big that would help a lot of people?
Yeah,
That's really cool.
I came up to North Carolina, up to North Carolina, and we spent 4 or 5 hours together, and we said, okay, let's do it.
I'm in awe.
If you're interested in all this, you ought to pick up a copy of his autobiography, which is about so big. It's not very big. And it's called James Patterson by James Patterson. But when you see what he decides to tell us about his life and how he tells it, you'll understand what you heard tonight and why he's so remarkably successful in getting people hooked. One of the reasons I like doing these books is I now get all of his books for free.
And he sends me his books too. But,
and I read them all, every last one.
How many books do you think you read a year?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I think I read from start to finish, carefully,
Yeah.
between 90 and 100. And then there's another 200 or more that I read in until I feel that I've gotten the grasp of it.
Right.
But I'm really, I'm trying to stop. Everybody says the book business is drying up and books don't sell as much as they used to. You can't walk in our house in any room without stepping over piles of books. So Hillary and I are trying single-handedly to save the
To
book
keep the
business.
bookstores open.
And it's diminishing the estate my daughter and grandchildren wanted to have. But we're doing our best. Look, I think we'd be in a lot better shape if we all could block out a little time every day to read and think and reflect and imagine. It would make us at least stop and count to 3 before we say something we'll regret.
It would certainly
Or
help
do
us to
something
understand
we'll
other
regret.
people better.
Yeah.
And where they come from and what they're all about and what the similarities are, and because there's nowhere where you can go and find out so much about other people as in books. Film's getting better at it.
Yeah.
They're getting better at it.
Well, on that note, they are telling me it's time. So I would like to thank both of you for the honor of a lifetime, and to thank you for everything you've done
you.
for readers and
Yeah.
what you've done for the world with your entire life. So,
And we've done a few of these, and this is one of the best moderated.
Oh, thank you.
Really good, really good. Thank you.
thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. Especially.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're great. Great.
Thanks for listening, and for more discussions like these, be sure and check out C-SPAN's Book TV every weekend on C-SPAN 2. Next week on this podcast, Patrick McGee talks about his new book, Apple in China, The Capture of the World's Greatest Company.